every UFC champion's best win. My criteria to assess their wins will be their skill, the champion's performance, and the opponent's win streak greatness prior and post fighting the champion, and also other outside factors such as injuries, short notice fights, up or down or weight class fights, etc., etc. We're going to start with flyweight, where the champion is Joshua Van, and he has two notable wins to pick from: Brandon Royval and the Big Pantoja. And I'm just going to be frank, bro, it is not Big Toes, because even though Toes is clearly the better fighter, and Joshua Van did win, and he did technically cause the injury, it didn't really showcase any of his skills or how good he is, but it was just really a fundamental mistake from Pantoja. And as someone who picked Joshua Van to beat Pantoja by decision, yes, we got the underdog pick. We, us fans, were robbed of a pretty exciting back and forth banger that I would love to see so much in the future. Like, even the first 30 seconds of that fight was already looking pretty exciting from the beginning. And as for the Royval win, it was extremely impressive, especially for it being a short notice fight and like a relatively quick return as well. Like, Joshua Van just fought 5-6 weeks before that, and he just beat the number one contender like that, and it's like clearly his best win for now. And also, I just want to mention that when I wrote the script, Pantoja was still the champion, and I just didn't get to use it, which I'm bummed out about. So here's the script on the screen if you want to read it. Clearly pause, So at bantamweight, the current champion is the GOAT, Peter Yan. And man, same shit with Pantoja, bro. I wrote so much when Merab was champion. So here's Merab resume evaluation, the same way I did Pantoja on the screen if you really want to read it for some reason. So for Peter Yan, we have quite a few wins to pick from, such as Song Yadong, Figgy, Corey Sandhagen, Aljo 1 and 2 if you're like a hardcore Yan fan and you want to count that, and of course Sean O'Malley if you're also counting that. But clearly we don't have to sit here and evaluate these fighters, because we can see that beating Merab is his best win, especially in the fashion that he did. Because up until this point, Merab was like the bantamweight GOAT. He was running through everyone in the division. We're talking about Sean O'Malley twice, as you see on the screen. He beat Corey Sandhagen, almost knocked him out as well. That's crazy. He beat Umar Nurmagomedov, albeit very, very close fight. He also beat Jose Aldo, very dominant performance, Henry Cejudo, as well as Peter Yan himself, extremely dominant performance. He was on the verge of reaching bantamweight greatness. He was about to break the record for most title defenses in the year. Actually, he did beat the record for most attempted title defenses in a year. He just couldn't successfully defend the title. And he is also tied for most title defenses at 135 with Aljo and Dom Cruz here. He was also on a 14 fight win streak, which is 5th or 6th longest in UFC history, and he was looking extremely unbeatable. Peter, like you can see on the screen here, was a plus 300 underdog in certain odd makers, and it wasn't even a crazy odd. People were straight up expecting Peter to just lose. And, in honesty, if no glaze, no Yan glaze, you guys know I love Yan over here, no glaze. I think, if how wins go, this is a top 5 greatest win of all time, if we're being truthful. This, as I've already glazed the win enough, Merab's the GOAT, whatever, and Peter Yan unbeaten, underdog, whatever, come on, it's a top 5 win of all time if you really want to argue for Peter Yan, which I'm doing. So there's bantamweight. Let's move on. At featherweight, man, we have Volk at the champ at featherweight. Wow, man, we living in peaches and creamville here, from flyweight to featherweight. Van, Yan, Volk, Ilias. We are having a great roster of champions right now in the UFC, man. This is a great time to be an MMA fan and root for really good champions. So the champ right now is Volk, the GOAT, and I don't think it's hard to decide from, because Max Holloway is clearly the biggest name on here. And of course, you could mention the likes of Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes, the Korean Zombie, but all of them were past their prime, and beside Jose Aldo, none of them has achieved the greatness Max Holloway has, especially with Max also beating 2 of these guys already. You could also mention fighters who Volk beat in the prime, such as the Eagle, Brian Ortega, Diego Lopez, Yair Rodriguez. So none of them had proven themselves enough to be on the same level as Max Holloway. And that leaves just the 3 Max Holloway wins. The question here is, which out of the 3 is the best one? The second win, of course, I think is the worst of them all since it was very close, and many argued that Max Holloway had actually won that. The first win was better since Max Holloway had the prestige of being a defending champion and was widely considered one of the greatest featherweights of all time on a massive win streak at featherweight, and it was a pretty clear win for Volk. However, the fight was still pretty competitive with Max having his moments, so I don't think it is the best one. The third one, in my opinion, is clearly the best of them all. After losing to Volk, Max put on the greatest performance of his life against Calvin Kattar, creating one of the most iconic moments in UFC history, and then beating Yair Rodriguez in a 5-round fight in order to secure his trilogy with Volk. But this time, Volk showed out the gate and 50-45 him. Let me put this in perspective. He 50-45 Max Holloway with striking. No one in his prime has ever really outstruck Max Holloway that dominantly. If you look at Max's losses during his prime, right? Dustin Poirier went to war with him. Ilya was still visibly struggling with Max before the KO, and even Tadpole Max still wasn't dominated that much on feet. Specifically, Dustin Poirier submitted him on the ground. Conor McGregor took him down and controlled him on the ground. Volk outstriking and putting on a clinic on Max Holloway like that is not only his best win or the best win at featherweight, but it is the greatest win in MMA history ever. Why did I put this picture of Volk here? I don't know. Just enjoy it. At lightweight, the champion is Ilya Topuria, and his wins to pick from is Max Holloway, Volk, or Charles Oliveira. I think we could just cross out Charles here, since he was only on a 1-fight win streak, past his prime, and never really deserved a second shot, even though Ilya did put on a very good performance, which leaves just Max Holloway or Alexander Volkanovski. Volk is clearly a better fighter than Charles. He has never been defeated at featherweight before. He had 5 title defenses and bounced back after losing. But he was also coming off of a KO loss on quite short notice and still was not in his prime. Max Holloway, on the other hand, was on a 3-fight win streak with very notable names such as Arnold Allen, the Korean Zombie, and putting on yet another of the most iconic moments in MMA history against Justin Gaethje. He also bounced back against Dustin Poirier quite dominantly. But the biggest reason for why I chose Max Holloway over Volk, albeit quite narrowly, is because Ilya is the first person to ever KO Max Holloway. Max has never been KO'd before, obviously, and partially it is because of his chin. But I think him being quite technical and overwhelming his opponents so that they focus on defense and can't throw shots also contribute to this. Ilya dealing with Holloway's volume, pressure, and nearly added kicking game to ultimately knock him the fuck out is what makes this win so fucking great. At welterweight, this one's really tricky since Islam is one of the all-time greats and he had many good wins in the past. He had Volk 2X, Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan, Jack Della Maddalena, Dan Hooker. Man, I'm running out of screen estate here to put the wins on, man. So we're gonna have to take a different metric here, right? We're gonna start by crossing out some of these wins. Dustin Poirier is out immediately. He was old, he was injured, and the performance was not all that great. So we're just gonna cross him off. The second Volk win also getting crossed off immediately. It was short notice, and Volk barely had any time to train when his style kind of revolved around having time to prep and studying his opponents. Arman Tsarukyan and Dan Hooker were both early into their career, and both fights were short notice, so both those wins are off the table, which leaves the first Volk win, Charles Oliveira and Jack Della Maddalena. Charles Oliveira at the time was riding an 11-fight win streak with names such as Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Mike Chandler, Tony Ferguson, and I guess Kevin Lee. Out of these 4 or 5, Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier especially are very good wins. And for Islam to finish Charles like he did, submitting the greatest submission artist of all time, this is probably an S-tier win for Islam. And Volk is probably also a top 5 fighter of all time in my opinion, and probably also the greatest striker of all time. I'm just gonna put it as that, man. He's the greatest MMA striker in the history of MMA. It's not a hot take. It shouldn't be a hot take. Anyway, he was undefeated in UFC, 12-fight win streak. And he was coming off the greatest win of all time in Max Holloway 3, setting the record for most title defenses at featherweight and is the consensus featherweight GOAT. And even though people said it was close and competitive and they say Volk got robbed or whatever, if you watch it back, it was a clear 49-46 from Islam. And I stand on that, by the way, which makes this win yet another S-tier win. And in my opinion, a better win than Charles because Volk is miles better and higher on the all-time list as a fighter. Last but not least, we have Jack Della Maddalena. Now, on paper, JDM has the weakest resume out of anyone Islam has ever fought. His best win before this was a win over Bilal, and before that, Gilbert Burns. Both of them has not aged very well. However, this was a double champ fight, and Islam was also moving up a weight class to fight a heavier and bigger opponent. It's also one of his most dominant performances compared to his other wins. And I also feel like JDM is quite underrated skill-wise. Not getting subbed by Islam in of itself is already a pretty good achievement. And he also has a still underrated boxing and striking skill set in general, as well as an underrated ground escape game and an underrated scramble game. And all in all, I think the double champ status, being a heavier opponent, and the dominant performance and JDM having this underrated skill set makes this Islam's best win. At middleweight, Khamzat has like an underrated amount of good wins. He submitted Robert Whittaker in round 1. He beat Usman by decision, etc., etc. But his best win is still DDP, bro. Like, him beating DDP alone would have already been his best win. But it's the way he did it that impresses me the most. Because even though it wasn't entertaining, it was boring as shit, it was really, really dominant. You could argue that it is an all-time great win. Because every single round, beside round 1, was an arguable 10-8, and DDP, in my opinion, is a top 3 middleweight ever. At light heavyweight, it's also very difficult for me to pick from since Pereira has a lot of quality wins. Izzy is probably the biggest name on his resume, but he was losing that fight before the KO came along, and then he got chinned in the rematch when Izzy spun back for the beef. Jan is probably his second best name, but Jan was an old man, and he arguably lost this fight against Jan, and it does not really compare to other performances of his. Jamal Hill. Jamal was a former champion, and Pereira's performance was very good, but we've been knowing this, bro. We've been knowing that Hill is a fraud, and he's not that skilled at all, and his losing streak right now only shows to prove that. Now, Yuri, where do I even begin? Yuri, obviously, amazing fighter, also very skilled, and he is very close to being Alex's best win for me. The reason I'm not picking him is because in the first fight, Yuri was coming off a long layoff due to his shoulder injury. You can see the clickbait thumbnail by the doctor right here. The second fight was also on short notice, and Yuri was not able to get a full camp in. I do think the first Yuri win is extremely close to being his first win, his best win, since Yuri was on a 13-fight win streak during the UFC and just won one of the greatest fights of all time against Glover Teixeira. And last, his best win of all time, in my opinion, Big Ank. Now, listen, Ank was on a 14-fight no-loss streak. He had a draw in the title fight against Jan Blachowicz, one that I think he won very clearly. And he also beat Alex for the belt before this. And the performance against Ank also was pretty good. Alex started early with some leg kicks, which hurt Ank, and then ultimately knocked him out in the end. And in my opinion, right, the Ank win and the Yuri win are pretty close compared to each other. And I won't disagree if you put Yuri instead of Ank, but I think Ank edges it due to him actually beating Pereira and him having an extremely long win streak in the UFC. And last, we have heavyweight. At heavyweight, I'm going to just throw the performance criteria out the counter here because Aspinall just finishes all of his wins in the first round anyway. So we're just going to skip past that, right? So his wins to consider from are Volkov, Blades, and Pavlovich. Pavlovich was on a 6-fight win streak, not just a win streak, a 6-fight first-round KO streak. He beat Derek Lewis, the Black Beast. He beat Tai Tuivasa, who at the time, right? I know Tai Tuivasa is kind of shit now, but at the time, he was only on a 1-fight losing streak, and previously was on a 5-fight winning streak. And Sergey also beat Curtis Blades himself. But he did lose to Volkov afterwards. But he is currently on a 2-fight win streak over top contender Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who they cut for no reason. Why did they cut Jairzinho, bro? And he also beat Waldo Cortes Acosta, a sneakily good win. That has been aging very well for him. And next we have Volkov, who actually was a Bellator champion in his tadpole days, in his skinny pretty boy day, right? And before losing to Tom, he had a very good run in UFC. He beat guys like Big Country Boy Roy Nelson. He beat Stefan Struve, who has a win over the heavyweight GOAT, Stipe Miocic. He beats Fabricio Verdum, a top 5 heavyweight of all time. He beat Alistair Overeem. And I guess he beat Marcin Tybura, if you want to put that up there. And after losing to Aspinall, he went 5-1, which arguably should be a 6-fight win streak because he got robbed against Gane. And right now, Volkov is luckily still in the title picture for a rematch soon one day because he just beat Jilton Almeida. I also consider Volkov to be the greatest heavyweight to never win a belt, beside maybe Alistair Overeem. Next, we have Curtis Blaydes, which is really hard to evaluate how good of a win he is because Blaydes is quite inconsistent. He has wins over Jilton Almeida, Volkov, JDS, Alistair Overeem, but still loses to guys like Sergey Pavlovich and went to a very close decision with Rizvan Kuniev, albeit he claims he was sick. And prior to Aspinall, he went 4-1 in his last 5 and knocked out top contender Jilton Almeida in round 1, which was, by the way, I just want to say, man, Jilton Almeida is being like a really bad rep for the jiu-jitsu community at heavyweight. Because first he gets to shoot a takedown, gets stuff, does nothing, gets knocked out by Curtis Blaydes, and now you shoot takedowns, lay on top of lay on top of Volkov, and then does nothing and then loses a decision from elbow from guard from Volkov, which is like so embarrassing for not just him but the BJJ community in general. Man, y'all gotta like change the rule set or like adapt to MMA style or something because like Jilton Almeida has the potential to be great, but he just does stupid shit, which is like I don't know, man. But back to Aspinall, man. I'm picking Volkov as his best win due to how many great wins he has and his run afterwards, but Sergey is really close behind him due to his win streak full of round 1 KOs as well as his resurgence. So thanks for watching. This was really badly made, but I hope you enjoyed it. I will drop more videos in the future, man.